Guys, welcome everybody. I'm just going to record this so that we can other people can see it if they need to, and it's good to see you guys and some old friends on this. I hope those of you that have that know me well and that have done a lot of this stuff before, I hope this is kind of designed as a webinar for folks who are still relatively new to the 3DM stuff. So I hope it's not going to be too basic for you. But of course, we'll have some Q&A time. So for those of you that want to dig in a bit deeper, we can do that too. If I can ask you guys to all just keep your Zoom on mute if you haven't yet done that, that'd be great. And then if you have questions and things, I think with the number of people we've got on today, when we have less people, we usually just say to folks to chime in as they want to if they've got things they want to ask. But I think with the number of folks we've got on today, maybe I'll make sure we leave some time for Q&A at the end. So I'll do some stuff with you, and then we'll have some Q&A slots if that's okay. And you just have to remember that with this number of people, I won't necessarily see you. Once I put the whiteboard up, I can't see everybody. So remember to take yourself off mute if you want to ask something. Otherwise, you'll just be speaking and wondering why everybody's ignoring you. So hopefully that's helpful. And then what we'll do is we're going to record this, and I'll put it on the 3DM Vimeo site, which I think is Vimeo/We Are 3DM. I think it's still got the old 3DM name on it. And we'll put that up there so that you can, if you have to leave early, or if there's someone else that you know that wanted to look at this, then they can just see it there. So I hope that's helpful. So let's just all make sure that we've got our microphones on mute so that we don't stop other folks from hearing if stuff goes off. And we're going to talk a little bit about the Discipleship Square today. So I'm going to put up a whiteboard, which means I can't see many of you at that point. I'm hoping that most of you have kind of heard about the Discipleship Square before at some point, but I'm going to just do a quick kind of reminder of it. Sounds like somebody hasn't got their mute on. If you could just make sure you've got your mute on, that'd be great. Otherwise, we get a lot of background noise going on. So the Discipleship Square is one of the key life shapes that we have with 3DM. And the idea is that as you look at the ministry of Jesus, you find him basically engaging with different leadership styles when the disciples are at different stages. And we find that by looking at the way that Jesus led the disciples in the Gospels, and we kind of would look at ourselves going round the square like that. I've drawn it as a single square because it's too difficult in Zoom to do it all separately. But I'll just try and kind of add some little arrows so that we can see. So it's going that way. That kind of works. Trying to do anything on a trackpad is tricky, isn't it? You get kind of kindergarten type drawing, but we're basically going that way around the square, I just want to think with you the way that Jesus led at different times, and really the essence of the teaching on the Discipleship Square is that we don't just we don't just lead people when we're trying to raise up disciples. We don't just lead people the way that we naturally like to lead. Instead, following Jesus' example, we identify where people are on the discipleship journey, and we lead them the way that they need to be led in order to be able to get breakthrough and to progress as a disciple. So what that means is that if you're using this kind of approach to leadership, that you're going to be leading different people in your teams or in your group or whatever in different ways at different times, depending on what you think, as you kind of discern where they are, depending on what they need. And so I just want to kind of remind you of what those different stages are. So the kind of place where you'd find Jesus doing D1 leadership, this is kind of if you like, visionary or classical leadership, and you might find it in places like Matthew 4:18 and 19. So this is where Jesus says, come follow me, I'll make you fishers of people. So he's not giving much detail. He's being visionary. He's saying, this is where I'm going. This is what I'm doing, guys. And you're invited to come if you want to join in with what I'm doing. And I'm just going to do this kind of quick overview. So if you like, this is kind of like, you could call this like visionary leadership, or you could call it classical leadership. It's that kind of picture. D2, which you find in the second kind of quarter of the different Gospels, particularly the first three Gospels, the Synoptic Gospels. This is where the disciples begin to feel a bit discouraged, and it's getting difficult. And Jesus adopts much more of a coaching leadership approach. So he's beginning to coach them. We'll look in a bit more detail at that in a minute. But I don't know if somebody has forgotten to put their mute on, but if you can just make sure you've got your mute on, that would really help. We won't get sound feedback. And you might find Jesus doing this kind of thing, for example, in Mark 6, 30 to 31. That's where he said, it said, so many people coming and going, they didn't even have a chance to eat. So he said to them, come with me by yourselves to a quiet place for some rest. So he's taking them off to different places. And maybe you might also find a statement like in Luke 12, I won't write that down, but in Luke 12:32, where he says, don't be afraid, little flock, for your Father has been pleased to give you the kingdom. There's a picture of Jesus coming alongside them, encouraging them, helping them to keep going. Then D3 leadership, this is where you've got people now who, and really, if you do D2 leadership well, just to say this, it's where you go from being a hired hand to being a good shepherd. So, what's the difference biblically between a hired hand and a good shepherd? The difference is that a good shepherd has laid down his life for the sheep. And a hired hand is someone who's just got the job of leading. A good shepherd is someone who's actually given their life to leading you, and they're prepared to make the sacrifice. Often for us as leaders in the West, what that sacrifice primarily comes in terms of time. When people are at the stage of D2 leadership, often what they need is more time. That's difficult for us because most of us are very busy. We've got very full schedules. But if you do that well, then people come through, and by D3, you're already becoming team. And this is where you share much more detail with them about what your vision, what your strategy is, why you're doing what you're doing. You bring them into the loop on those things, and you ask them what they think. You begin to ask them what their opinions are. A classic example of this for Jesus would be John 15:15. I used to call you servants, but now I call you friends. Because everything the Father's made known to me, I'm making known to you. So that's Jesus doing all of those kind of dialogues in that last section of John, is him really giving the disciples much more detail than they've ever had before. So their loyalty is no longer in question. They've become a team. By D3, you've got a proper team, not just a group of people. And now they get the DNA. They kind of you're beginning to explain why you do what you do, and you're really getting them to start to do some things. You're getting them to help. And then D4, this is really by the time you get from between the Great Commission through into the Ascension. This is delegating leadership. So this is where you're actually beginning to step out of the picture and really making space for others. And I guess I could put down the Matthew 28:19, the Great Commission there. Well, you might want to put, say, John 16, 16. That's where Jesus is flagging up to them that he's going to move into this phase of leadership, where he said, in a little while you'll see me no more, then after a little while you'll see me. It's the thing as you begin to move into this time of leadership is you begin to make yourself absent. You're not as available as you used to be. And you're really asking them to step up and start doing these things. So there's kind of big picture of each of those. And that's hopefully most people on the webinar know those things already. And there are different terms that we've used in 3DM, aren't there, to talk about these things, to describe. Generally, we've used D1, 2, 3, 4 to describe the experience of the disciples, and we've used the letter L1, 2, 3, 4 to describe what the leader does. I'm not going to distinguish between those two things. I'm just going to call them D1, 2, 3, 4. But when someone's being discipled in D1, generally their experience is one of unconscious. In fact, I'm going to do this in a different color so it's easier for us to see. Of unconscious competence, incompetence. By which it means they don't know what they're doing at all, but they don't realize that they don't know what they're doing. You know, it's like your teenage person started driving, looking at how many people drive and saying, well, how hard can it be? You know, which is an even more powerful analogy in England, where you have to take your test with a stick shift than it is in America, where you can do it with an automatic car. And you very quickly become conscious of your incompetence. So it's at that point that people are beginning to realize that they can't do it. That's when they need coaching and they need encouragement. They need grace and vision, don't they, extended to them to help them to get through that phase. And then you have a point when they begin to realize how to do something, and they're beginning to learn how to do it, and they can do it, but only by trying hard and thinking about what they're doing. That's what we'd call conscious competence. So I don't know how you teach driving in the States. In the UK, one of the things we'd say mirror, signal, maneuver. So we say first you look in the mirror, check there's no one behind you, then you signal to say what you're doing, and then you do your maneuver. And so for people in the UK who are in conscious competence when it comes to driving, they'll be doing mirror, signal, maneuver, but they'll actually be thinking in their head mirror, signal, maneuver. And that will be helping them to remember to do it. They're having to think about what they're doing. Whereas someone who's been driving for 20 years, they won't even think about that. They'll just do it automatically. And that 20-year thing, or however long it takes, that's where you move into unconscious competence. Now it's muscle memory. It's just become normal. You don't even think about it. You just do it. And there's advantages and disadvantages at that stage. The advantage of unconscious competency is that you are very good at what you do. The disadvantage is you may not be able to remember what the ingredients are that make you good at what you do. So one of the things we've talked about in 3DM lots of times over the years is we talk about, as we're trying to disciple people, dialing back to conscious competency. So i.e. thinking, okay, I've been preaching 20 years. It takes me 2 hours to plan a sermon, not 2 days. And generally when I preach, there's a strong response. People respond strongly, and there's a level of conviction. And, people aren't just listening to it and nodding. There's actually something going on there. That's great. What is it that I actually do to be able to prepare that way and to get that kind of response? It's not just some spiritual magic. It's with a discipleship mindset, we believe that when things happen, it's because of what you do. And actually being able to identify what you do and be clear about what you do means then you can pass what you do on to other people. And so often one of the problems with discipleship is that we're functioning with unconscious competence. And that means that people will be saying, well, how do you do it? And you're kind of thinking, well, I don't know really, I just do it. And that's not helpful to anybody. So one of the ways to dial back to conscious competency, if you're good at something and you don't know why, is to get your team to ask you questions. So I'd like you to make observations. I want you to watch me while I'm preaching. Say you've got a few young folks that you're training them how to preach. I want you to watch what I'm doing. I want you to observe it. And we're going to have some time afterwards where you're going to feed back. What were the things that you think that you were observing that I was doing that were helping people to receive the sermon, or helping the communication to be clear, or whatever it was? So getting people to ask you questions. I think if you get some team members who are good at asking you questions that help you dial back to conscious competence, that is a real gift. And it's certainly worth trying to cultivate that in your teams and so on. So that's some of the background there. And I just want to use another little tool. So hopefully that's all of that stuff is reasonably familiar to you. But I just want to think about if we just put this through an invitation challenge matrix. So I'm just going to put up in the top corner here of the whiteboard. If you imagine two axes like this, which is this is high invitation. I'm going to just put HI, high invitation. Down here is low invitation. High invitation, low invitation. Over on the right here is high challenge, and on the left is low challenge. Yeah. I'm not going to fill in the low invitation, low challenge quadrant because it's not worth it. It's just, it's a non-starter, isn't it? If you're not going to do any challenge or any invitation, nothing's going to happen. So we'll think about the other boxes really. But I just want to think through with you what those things are. So D1 is visionary leadership. You're saying to people, hey guys, this is what I think God's called me to do. Would you like to come and do it with me? And people might be saying, well, I don't know about the thing that you're doing, but I like you. I'd like to hang out with you. That's not what you're looking for, is it? Or I agree with the vision, but I've got my own ideas about how that's going to work. You're not looking for that either. You're looking for people who want to follow you in helping you achieve the vision that God's given you. So high invitation, high challenge in that kind of scenario, to me, means that what you're basically doing is you're giving a bold vision. You're giving a bold vision. It's visionary, it's clear, and you're telling people what to do. So, for example, we're going to start a new missional community, and it's going to be a neighborhood missional community. And the vision is this: we're trying to reach the people of Longwood neighborhood with the good news of Jesus. Would you like to do that with us? Yeah. And that I'm using the example from one of the missional communities that my wife and I have been in. And we had some people that said initially, oh, we heard you're doing a missional community. Can we come and do it with you? And what we would say to them is, the vision is to reach the people of Longwood neighborhood. So is that your vision? I mean, we'd love it if you came with us, but I mean, you don't even live in that neighborhood. What are you thinking of moving? That'd be fantastic. Are you going to move into our neighborhood with us to do this with us? That'd be brilliant. Bold vision. If we did high challenge and low invitation, then really what we're dealing there with is we're creating a barrier to entry that's unnecessary. So it might be that someone says, could we come and join you? And we would just say, sorry, we don't want Christians. We're trying to reach people who don't know the Lord. We don't want a bunch of Christians. No, you can't join us. In my experience in the groups, when you're running groups, as soon as you make something that exclusive, I don't know, in my experience, the Lord just seems to take his blessing off it. It's not a kingdom dynamic. The kingdom is inclusive. And so just giving people a straight barrier to coming with you, I think generally it's very difficult to do that and keep a kingdom dynamic. There were times when Jesus did it, weren't there? There were times when Jesus said, no, don't come with me, go back to your hometown. So there were times, but if you're all high challenge and low invitation, I think generally, in my experience, it makes it difficult for it to function well in terms of kingdom. And if you're high invitation, low challenge, this is a little bit contrived in terms of finding B words. I think you're doing a bait and switch. I.e., hey, it's going to be great. We're going to get together and we're just going to have a great time. It's going to feel like family. Why don't you come and join us? And then they come and join you. It's like, yeah, what we're really trying to do is reach all the people here with the gospel, or maybe with people who don't yet know the Lord, seekers. You say, hey, we've got this vision that we're going to be really great neighbors and we're going to hang out together and we're going to cook out every Friday night. Would you like to come? And then they get there and you say, oh, by the way, we're going to have a Bible study too. I hope that's all right. Yeah. So if you do high invitation and low challenge, that's bait and switch. So for me, if I'm inviting to a group, if I'm inviting seekers to a group, I usually will have built a level of friendship that allows me to give some challenge before I would invite them to a formal group. And when I did invite them, I wouldn't probably give them the out vision, because they probably are the out vision, but I'd give them the up and the in vision. So I'd say, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to get together on a Friday night, and this is the vision that we had for our missional community in our neighbourhood. We want to be great neighbours who feel like family. We already feel like we're good friends with you guys. We'd love that. And also, we want to be people who don't just know about God, but we're getting to know God together. So we're going to spend time together, hang out together, have fun, and we're going to do a bit of Bible study, and we're just going on that journey together. We would love you to be part of that. What do you think? So that's high invitation. We'd love you to be part of it. Come and be family. High challenge, and we're also going to get to know God better. For people who are Christians who are joining, we would tend to use the out vision. So we've used the up and the in vision for seekers. For Christians, I'd tend to use the out vision, which is, well, yeah, I mean, you'd like to join us in our community? Great. Well, our vision is to reach the people of Longwood neighbourhood who don't yet know Jesus, the seekers, the people of peace. Is that your vision? Because if it is, great. If it isn't, we're not the right group for you to join. And we had one couple who asked if they could join us, and they weren't from our neighbourhood. And we gave them that challenge, and they said, well, we're not from your neighbourhood, but we really want to learn how to do this. How about we join you for a year and help you reach your people? And then in a year, you can send us off to our neighbourhood and we'll do it. And we were like, great, fantastic. So one of the mistakes that I find that people make more than any other is that they're not clear enough. Usually it's high invitation, low challenge at D1, but sometimes it's the other way around. It's high challenge, low invitation. Oh, we don't want Christians joining us. And we're trying to walk that kind of center line of having a bold vision that's clear, and we're inviting people to do something with us, not just to be with us, but at the same time, there is an invitation there. So I'm just going to move on to the next stage, but it's probably time for a couple of questions. So if you've got a question on that or a comment, just take yourself off mute, speak up, and then put yourself back on mute afterwards. That would be great. So anybody just got any comments or questions on that point? Okay, so either people haven't got questions or someone forgot to unmute themselves. Either way, we're going to move on. So I'm going to use that same quadrant there to just think through these other ones as well. So let's just remove these. So we're going to think about D2 now. So D2 is where people have started doing stuff. It's harder than you think. So say you're doing a missional community in a suburban, middle-class suburban setting. The classic D2 would be you've got a core team of people together. You've got excited. You've got a vision. You've been praying. You've had some cookouts. You've got to know some people. You've met the neighbours. You've invited a few people, and then none of the people that you invite want to come, and instead you get Christians who want to come, which means you're going to end up doing pastoral care and not evangelism or mission. Or you get some folks who come and they start coming and they do some Bible studies, but they just are not interested really in going any further with following the Lord. They're cultural Christians and they think that they know the Lord already, although you can tell that they don't, or whatever. And you're beginning to get, you're just beginning to get fed up with it. It's like, this is hard. This is harder than I thought it was. We did the first missional community that Ellie and I did was with a really a lot of poor people. We had a lot of drug addicts and prostitutes in our missional community. And in 18 months, we saw 45 people come to the Lord. We've just done 2 years of a missional community, which was wealthy, people in a nice suburb. And in 2 years, we saw 2 people come to the Lord. Generally, we all know the Isaiah 61. He didn't generally, Jesus loves the rich just as much as the poor, but he generally came to bring good news to the poor. And so the gospel is more effective in that setting. That doesn't mean that we're all called to just reach out to the poor, though. But there can be things like that. You're in certain environments, there's just not going to be the level of harvest that you're going to see in other environments. But there's other challenges. When we had the missional community with drug addicts and prostitutes, we had the amount of pastoral care we had to engage with was unbelievable, and all of the problems that kept occurring and so on. So, take your pick. So in the second one, conscious incompetency, people are becoming aware that they can't do it. Jesus is trying to get the disciples away. He's investing in them. Don't be afraid, little flock. The Father's pleased to give you the kingdom. And what you're trying to do there is people have got themselves into a hole and you're trying to get down into the pit with them, but you've got to make sure you bring a ladder. So if you do high invitation, but low challenge, in a way, all you're doing there is you're just commiserating with people, aren't you? I'm not sure if I can spell that, but yeah. So you're just kind of, I don't know if that's the correct spelling, but you're just commiserating with them. You're just expressing sorrow for their situation, but not actually helping them. If you're doing high challenge but low invitation at that point, you're saying, well, this was the original vision, and you've got to try harder to try and get that vision. All you do is bring condemnation. Yeah. And what we're actually trying to do is we're trying to bring to people at that point both vision and grace. This is the vision that God's called us to. He's called us and he's faithful. It's by his grace that we'll see breakthrough. And so you're helping people to feel that conviction. And I mean that not like conviction of sin, but I have a conviction that we're going to move forward. Yeah. People begin to have a conviction that, okay, this is hard. And it's a really important stage for people that you're leading, isn't it? Because let's be honest, the promise to us as Christians is not an easy life. The promise is a mixed cup of suffering and joy. And the promise is it's through trials of many kinds that we'll enter the kingdom. And so if we're trying to raise up discipleship teams, we're trying to raise up people actually who are robust and who have perseverance, are prepared to keep going when it's tough. And what is it that keeps going? What is it that makes you embrace the cross? Well, Jesus embraced the cross for the joy that was set before him. So it's holding out the vision to people and saying, hey guys, this is the vision, let's keep going. Let's recognize there may be some pruning along the way. There's going to be difficulty. We've got your back. As your leader, I've got your back. Let's have each other's back. Let's be good shepherds, not just hired hands. It's giving people time. Jesus often withdrew with the disciples at this time, spent time with them. So it's giving people time. It might be that you, with someone on your team, you notice that they're going into that kind of D2 where they're finding it all a bit hard. And you just put some reminders in your calendar to drop them some text. I mean, it may be you're pastorally on the ball enough that you don't need that. For me, I would need to remind myself because I've got 101 things I'm thinking about. Or it might be that you just change your schedule so you've got a few more kind of free slots or a free evening a week where you can do something with them. I always remember when Mike Breen was training me up as a junior pastor in his church, and it got to the point where I was beginning to really struggle with some things. And he did most of his D2 coaching with people using golf, because he was really into golf and so a lot of the team. So he'd get people to golf and play golf, and he'd do a lot of coaching with them during that time, helping them to think through, giving them vision and grace. I absolutely hate golf and I'm terrible at it. And so he knew that, and he didn't try to make me be led his way. He led me the way I needed to be led. So suddenly he started deciding he wanted to go to the movies more regularly, and he knew I like movies. And so he would say, hey, Paul, I'm going to go and catch that new film on Wednesday night. Are you free? And he'd come and pick me up from my house. We'd have a 20-minute drive to the movie theatre. We'd talk the whole way. In England, there's usually a bar at a movie theatre. We'd sit there and we'd have a drink together, carry on talking. We'd watch the movie, and then we'd carry on processing on the way back. And he'd done all this input, and it was all coaching input to encourage me to know to keep hold of vision and grace. And yeah, it hadn't really even felt like it was a meeting. It felt like we'd had a fun evening together. He was really good at doing that. And I think a lot of leaders at D2, when their teams start to struggle, they try to just hype everybody back up to D1. It's like, okay, guys, I know this is a bit hard. Here's a new vision. Let's do this now. And if you do that, I think you lurch from one vision to the next, and you never get to the point where the people that you're leading become a real team and become like they feel like family. And the thing is, if you are trying to build a multiplying movement of discipleship out of a local church in your setting, then at some point you will hit a level of spiritual warfare that goes beyond what you've ever experienced before. The enemy absolutely hates it. The enemy always hates Christians. He'll always try and take us out if he can. But if you're basically leading a very Christian, teaching church where it's basically a pastoral care ministry, some great teaching on a Sunday, and people having some nice donuts, and people have a good time. And there will still be battles because Satan hates God's family, but probably you will not have a level of spiritual attack going on like you will if you start saying, okay, let's really try to work out how we can do mission and discipleship. We can actually try and reach people with the good news, and we actually try and empower and train our people to do that. We're going to try and do it in a way that multiplies. You start doing that, you'll hit massive spiritual attack. The enemy absolutely hates it. And the thing about that is that when you come under that kind of attack, if your team is just a bunch of employees, it will fall apart. If your team is a family, they'll have each other's back and they'll weather the storm. And the way that you make a team family is by taking the time to coach them through D2 into D3 and not just hyping them back up to D1. So any comments on that, on D2 there? Any just to unmute yourself if anyone wants to ask a question or comment on that, or any thoughts about that?
My question goes beyond D2. What's your method of choosing who you're going around the square with?
Yeah, that's a really good question, John. What I would generally do is, one of the problems, especially if you're in an inherited church model where basically you've already got a whole load of team and who knows where they are in terms of wanting to be disciples or just believers or what, which is often the case. One of the problems is that the people that you would naturally be leading in terms of the kind of the way that the organization is set up aren't necessarily the people that really want to be disciples. So that's one of the challenges.
Right.
Generally, what I do is whenever I'm in a leadership situation in church, I always think slow track and fast track. I'm always thinking both things at the same time. Mm-hmm. So slow track is, how can I just invest in everybody to help everybody become a little bit more missional, a little bit more community orientated, a little bit more of a disciple. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So for example, if in a church that I'm a leader in, it's got lots of Bible studies, traditional style Bible studies. Yeah. If I can just get those Bible study folks to move from filling in the blanks to asking the circle questions, what's God saying? What am I going to do about it? As they study the Bible, that's a significant discipleship step for everybody, isn't it? If I can just get my groups to think up, in and out, as well as in whatever they're doing, and actually think about the outward dimension, that's a significant discipleship step. So I'm thinking about those things in terms of the big picture for everybody, including perhaps some of my inherited members of staff who are never going to get the full thing. Let's at least help everyone move from being believers to being disciples a little bit. Yeah. But at the same time, John, I'm also throwing out bait, if you like, for the fast track, for the high bar stuff, which might be some stories of when I've done it. I think often you have to demonstrate it yourself. Even if you're not, what people need isn't a perfect example. We've got that already in Jesus. People need a living example. So even if you're kind of somewhat self-depreciatingly telling stories of failed attempts,
Sure.
Oh, we try this, it didn't work, but we're going to try that, yeah. And as you do that sort of thing, you maybe teach a bit on mission and discipleship in the church, and you start raising these things up, and then you look for who are the people who respond to that positively by coming back to you. Who are the people that you watch thinking, they're getting interested in this? It's a bit like, when we talk about people of peace, when we're trying to find seekers, within the church, it's almost like you're looking for pioneers of peace. Where are the pioneers of peace to you as you share this message? And I would then intentionally start to throw out a D1 vision with them. Hey guys, I've been thinking alongside all the existing groups we've got, I'd love it if we had a small number of people who are really trying to do this missional discipleship thing. And I wondered whether, obviously you'd need a missional vision. It won't be easy because we're talking about trying to get a breakthrough here, but I'd be prepared to put some time and investment in. I thought about you guys. Would that be something you'd be prepared to have a go at? Yeah. And that actually is a D1 conversation, isn't it? They've got no idea at this point how hard that will be. They're just pioneer types who are excited. Yeah.
Sure.
And then you get them to have a go. And then there'll come a point where they realize it's much harder than they thought. And then that's when we come into this D2 dynamic.
Got it.
Yeah, where you're really coming alongside and saying, well, let's really, let's press in on this. If you get a breakthrough here, this could change our whole church, but This is hard. We're not going to win this battle just on our own strength. So let's make sure we've got some prayer backup for you. I'm in this with you. Let me come and spend some time with you as we're thinking through how to do this. It's much better to get breakthrough with one or two small groups in the church of people who really begin to get breakthrough, rather than to share a kind of general attempt at breakthrough across lots of people that only get a little bit of breakthrough.
Sure.
Jesus did the full works of just 12 people, of which 11 came through the process, rather than trying to do everything with all 20,000 when he taught, you know? So that's what I would suggest, John. Is that helpful?
Yes, it is. Thank you kindly.
Oh, good. Okay. Anyone else comment or question on that before we move on to D3 and D4?
Can you talk about preparing your team for spiritual attack, and about making that turn from D2 to D3?
Sure. I mean, in terms of spiritual attack, I think usually when the enemy attacks, it's covert or overt. And covert or overt attacks, usually in my experience, depend on two things: the culture that you're in and the stage of breakthrough that you're at. So if you're in a non-Christianized culture, the enemy will often use overt attacks from the get-go. If you're in a Christianized culture, the enemy will usually use covert attacks in the early stages. So, for example, you know, the average Christendom, Midwestern, church-going American may be a believer but not a disciple, realistically, in their lifestyle. You know, so they kind of believe in God and they love God, kind of, but they're, you know, it means they go to church on Sunday, and if they're really committed, maybe do a Bible study, but they're not thinking discipleship for the whole life. But if someone like that, you know, if say a demon manifests at the foot of their bed at night, what are they going to do? They're going to start praying to Jesus real quick. Yeah, it's overt attacks are not a particularly effective strategy, I don't think, for Satan in a Christianized environment, because they drive God's people into a deeper reliance on God. Instead, in a Christianized environment, Satan, in my experience, tends to use covert attacks, which is generally around accusation. So I can't tell you how many times 3DM have been told that we're a cult, for example, even though everything that we do is about low control, high accountability, not about high control. And even though none of us have got any money, which is usually one of the hallmarks of people who lead cults, you know, what is that? That's an accusation. And it's an accusation that basically is saying, I mean, with John Wesley in the Wesleyan revival, they said to him, they accused him of over-enthusiasm. That was the accusation, which in those kind of pre-Victorian times were that was considered a high insult. So accusation, I think, is often one of those things. Relational breakdown sometimes. I think if you keep pushing through and you ignore some of those things, or you obviously you up your prayer in order to cover the people that are trying to get breakthrough, then there often comes a point where it moves from covert to overt. So the enemy might directly start trying to, it might be through sickness. It might be that you start finding, I don't know, your kids at school really start being bullied. It might be that you get in physical accidents, those sorts of things. I don't think we need to be frightened of those things, because we can trust God to protect us in them. But I do think we need to be realistic that those things can happen. And one of the things is, I think it's really important, if you're trying to build a culture of mission and discipleship, that you increase the prayer culture in keeping with the missional culture. I.e., you don't try and send in ground troops without air cover, yeah, in terms of a military analogy. You'd have to make sure you've got air superiority if you were going to send in ground troops, wouldn't you? And I think it's the same spiritually. So I don't know whether that's enough there, Alexandra. Is that? I mean,
yes, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Well, good. Thank you. Well, let's just look at D3 and getting round from D2 to D3. So if you've been investing in people and coaching them in this way, so they've got this sense of conviction, okay, this is hard. This is where there's two things going on here. One is you're becoming a proper team that feels like family. And the other one is actually people are growing quite fast, even though they're not comfortable, because people are toughening up. You know, it's like, okay, gosh, yes, it does say in the Bible that anyone who wants to live a godly life will be persecuted, but I haven't really experienced that before, and now I have. Gosh, well, I've got a group of people with me. We're in this together. Let's just keep going. Let's press on. You know, and you start coming through into D3, and you realise that these people have there's been a pruning and a refining that happens at D2, and you begin to notice in people who've been through that. And by the way, in a team that you're leading, not everybody goes through these all at the same time. It's often more like a caterpillar, multi-segmented caterpillar going around. Some people might be in D3 while other people are still at D1. So it's worth being aware of that. This is kind of like a contextual leadership, isn't it? You're looking at each person thinking, how do I need to lead you to help you get to the next place that you're needing to get to? But for people moving towards D3, you begin to notice that they seem to be carrying the vision now. It's no longer you giving them the vision and feeding them with the vision, but now they actually are telling other people it. They're beginning to own it. You can see that there's some transfer of DNA from you to them, and that they're beginning to get it. And it's no longer you having to constantly, remind them and encourage them, but now they're beginning to get it. Jesus says, I now call you friends instead of servants, because I'm making everything known now that the Father's made known to me. So you start talking in a bit more detail. By the way, guys, did you notice when you were feeling down a couple of months ago, I cleared my schedule so I could spend some time with you? That's because you were at D2 and I was doing L2 leadership, just so you know that. I wouldn't usually explain the square to somebody until D3, until they're at D3, because I find it's much better for training people if their experience goes ahead of the information a little bit, and then you can say, oh, what you're experiencing, this is that. Than if you just front load it all and explain it all from the get-go. So when I'm training people up, I would generally, in terms of the life shapes, do the circle and the triangle and maybe the semicircle in the early stages. The square and probably the pentagon as well, I wouldn't use those tools until later on when they're beginning to get it. And they're beginning to become leaders themselves. So if we were going to think about what this would be in terms of high challenge, high invitation, low challenge, it might be that as you're bringing them through to D3, that if you're giving them high invitation, low challenge, in a way what you're doing at that point is you're letting them off the hook. Yeah, you're basically what you're doing is you're recognizing they had a hard time during D2, but you recognize that now they're beginning to gain some competency. They seem to begin to know what they're doing, but I just don't really have the heart to push them out. They're tired. It would be like it might be like Jesus saying to Peter, when Peter says, "Tell me to come to you, Lord." Yeah, it might be like Jesus saying, "Okay, but hang on, Peter, let me just walk on the water to come across to you so I can hold your hand while you get out of the boat." Yeah. And then Peter's like, wow, this is amazing. I can walk on water with Jesus holding my hand. But Jesus isn't trying to get Peter to the point where he can just walk on water with Jesus holding his hand. He wants him to get to the point where he can do it whether Jesus is standing there physically or not. I mean, Jesus knows exactly what he's trying to prepare Peter for. Peter, by Acts 5, is at the point where people are putting the sick out so that his shadow will fall on them and they'll get healed. That's what Jesus is wanting to do in Peter. So instead, Jesus says, yeah, come. Jesus knows jolly well that there's the wind and the waves. He's probably going to start sinking. That's okay. Yeah. So we don't want people off the hook. People have got to be prepared to step out. At D3, you're going to ask people to start doing things that they're going to feel are stretching. And you want them to be stretched. It's okay. On the other hand, Jesus still was there when Peter got out the boat, and he caught him when he fell. So if you just give them a challenge and you don't give them enough support, it's really, we talk about low invitation. Here, in a way, it's almost, that would be low support, isn't it? You need to support people as they're beginning to step out in D3. So, for example, you might say to somebody, okay, we've spent some time thinking about how to preach for a response, to get people to really respond, to preach with power. I've done some of that training with you. You've done a little bit of stuff with me. We've had you up giving a couple of testimonies. I want you to actually preach to our congregation of 200 on Sunday in 3 weeks' time. And it's time for you to do that. And they're like, oh gosh, I'm nervous about that. I don't know how to do it. And it wouldn't be just like, well, I'll see you on the Sunday, would it? It would be, well, do an initial draft. Here, let's have a chat first about what you're going to do, then do an initial draft and come back to me of what you think you're going to preach, and then I'll think it through with you, and then we're going to get to the point where you're ready to do it, and then you'll do it, and then I'm going to do a debrief with you afterwards. Yeah. So you're pushing them, but you're supporting them and you're helping them. And Jesus is saying, I'd like you to go in twos to every town where I'm about to go, knock on the door, say hi, find the people of peace, eat what they give you, minister to them, and minister to them with supernatural power as well as telling them the good news. But then he says, and then come back to me and we're going to process together. It was amazing, God. Even the demons, it was amazing, Jesus. Even the demons gave, submitted to us. And Jesus is like, that's great. Don't really focus on the demons, guys. Let's just be glad that your name's written in heaven. That's, he's doing this thing where he's sending them out and he's stretching them, but then he's giving them support. And if you do high invitation, high challenge at that point, I think people have ownership of what they're doing and of the challenge that you're bringing them to. And you're trying to get them to take ownership, of course. That's what you're trying to get them to do, isn't it? You want them to really own that this is the call on their life, and that they're prepared to take the risks and to step out. And then as they do that, you're basically, so your team, you're still making quite a few of the decisions in the team, but you're asking them what they think. So there's a lot of consultation at D3. Hey guys, what do you think about this? A friend of mine called Nick Harding, who leads 3GM stuff in England, the way he put it was, he said, you don't want to just offer people a baked cake. You want to offer them the ingredients and let them have it before you bake the cake. You want to have the conversation at that point. That's very much a D3 thing, isn't it? D1, you are offering a baked cake. Hey guys, this is what I'm going to do. Do you want to come with me and do it with me? D3, it's like, okay, we know that we've got to reach people. We're trying to do community. We're trying to do mission discipleship. We're trying to, but what is it? What do you think God's saying next? Or who do you think who do you think is the person of peace? What do you think is the next thing we need to do with that person of peace? It's those sorts of things, isn't it? So that's D3. Anyone got any comments or questions about D3 there? Remember to take yourself off mute if you have. Okay. And as people begin to grow, this is the one of the ways that we do this, you guys will know this, with D1.
May I ask a D3 question?
Oh yeah, sure. Yes, John.
One of the criticisms of consensus leadership is that it goes to the lowest common denominator of the leaders. What do you do to make sure that your leadership as a team has not devolved to where we can just finally all agree at the lowest common denominator? Yeah,
I don't think I don't think it's democratic leadership. I don't think it's just like we're just going to take a vote. I would still lead at D3, and the reason for that is that Jesus was still leading at D3. So mm-hmm. I would still tend to make most of the call. Well, I'd probably at D3 I would probably think of myself making maybe half the calls, half the decisions, and I'd be thinking about which decision should I make and where do I want them to start making decisions. But I think I personally favour, John, an approach to leadership which is we believe in leadership, but we also believe in proper consultation. So especially at D3, it's not that you're not making any of the leadership decisions, but you're really listening to your team and talking to them before you make those decisions. I think to me that's a good balance. I mean, I'm from a British background, a Baptist background, where so my tradition is the church meeting, mm-hmm. and the leader basically is the implementer of what the church meeting has decided. And the problem with that is if you've got a group of 30 on fire, highly motivated missionaries making decisions together, generally that works well. If you've got 100 nominal, everyday Christians all with their own agendas, it's just going to go in circles, So on the other hand, I was in an Anglican church for a long time. And there, in theory, the vicar, actually, the priest has a lot of power to make the decisions.
Sure.
And that can work, but actually you can get to a point where, you've got these two groups. You've got the church council and the priest, and then everyone else is just doing what they're told, and they either opt in or opt out, which means you basically get high control, low accountability in that setting. If you're in, you have to do what we say, and the only way you can get away with not doing what we say is to not be in,
Sure.
And so to me, it's always trying to get a balance between those two things. And to me, the balance lies somewhere in, yes, you operate with leadership, but as time goes on, you move into a place as you go from D1 through to D3 of increasing consultation and increasing conversation.
Thank you.
If I was in a Baptist setting, like with the members meeting, and they wanted me to lead, if I was coming in as a new pastor, I would say that to them. I'd say, just what I'd need permission from you as a meeting, as members, I'd need, if you want me to take you and help you to build missional discipleship, I would need permission from you to be quite directive with you for the first couple of years. And then as time goes on, the aim isn't for me to stay directive, but it's for me to get you to a point where we can make these decisions together, but you've been equipped enough to be able to do it. At the moment, I don't think you are. And if they weren't up for that, I wouldn't take the job, if that makes sense.
Yep. Thank you.
Great. And then, of course, Jesus doesn't just disappear off. So he doesn't just do the ascension. The D4 stages, he actually starts to be there and not be there, be there and not be there. And I think in a way, what you're doing at D4 is you're decreasing the support a little bit from D3. So at D3, it might be, hey, Steve, or hey, Sarah, I think it's time that you preach on a Sunday, and I'm going to let's go through a process over the next 3 weeks where I help you to prepare, and then you can do the preach, and we'll watch it, and then we'll do some, we'll reflect on it together afterwards, and we'll do that whole process. At D4, it might be, hey, Rich, I hate to say this, but I know it's Monday, and we're only like a week away from Sunday, but something's come up. I'm not going to be able to preach. Would you be able to cover it? Here's the topic. Yeah. And with my teams over the years, I actually actively do that when I think they're at D4. I'll do it on purpose. I'll make sure something does come up. Because I think there's something about not being there and then being there. These guys now, your team at this point, they do know what they're doing, but often it's unconscious competency, which means they often don't know. There's sometimes a kind of humility at this point. They don't realize that they can do it yet, but you can see that they can do it, and so you're, pushing the. It's like the mother eagle pushing the little eagles out the nest, isn't it? Okay, time to do this, guys. Sometimes the Lord forces that on you. Back in the Sheffield days, I remember when we lost our building in Sheffield, the Roxy nightclub building that we'd been in. We'd been investing in our missional community leaders. We had probably about 25 missional communities at that point, and we'd been huddling them. We'd learned how to do huddles. We'd been investing in them. We'd been training them, and they were all doing that stuff pretty much midweek. And then we lost our building, which meant Sunday missional communities became the main expression of church on a Sunday. Well, that felt like a massive drop over the cliff for them. They didn't think they were ready, but actually they were ready. And it was right they did it. And so we're supporting them, but we're supporting them doing what they're doing, and you guys know the thing, don't you? D1, I do, you watch. D2, I do, you help. D3, you do, I help. D4, you do, I watch. And so there's something at D4, it's important about being there and then not being there, being there and then not being there. In a little while, says Jesus, you'll see me no more, and then after a while you'll see me. I didn't manage to do some of you will be disappointed in me for this. I didn't manage to alliterate these ones, but if you do high invitation and low challenge here, I think what you get is apathy. I think if at this point you just say, yeah, you guys are really good now. I really like what you're doing. You've got the skills, it's great. But then you just carry on. You don't start to hand over what you're doing to people. I think people begin to get discouraged. They start looking for other things. If you've got apostolic type people in your church, they'll start putting their energy into other projects. They just become apathetic about the vision that you share together. Yeah. They need, at this point at D4, people need to be pushed into a challenge. So they don't need you just to be kind to them or to be affirming about their gifts and skills. They need you to actually push them out. Jesus' Great Commission, go and make disciples. Go. It's time to go now. You've got to go, guys. On the other hand, if you push them really hard to do stuff and you don't give them enough support, I won't be here, but then I will be here. People tend to feel coerced. It's kind of like you've got to be careful that people aren't just feeling like you've forced them into something that actually they weren't ready for. It's not really my vision, this. You're forcing me to do your vision. I remember that one of the things for me when I took over leading the church in Sheffield was Mike said to me, he said, you've seen my life. You've seen how hard it is to lead a church like this. You've seen the battles I've fought. He said, that's the cost, that's the price. He said, but the prize is that I think that you might be the person who's called to lead this church next. And he said to me, so there's the prize, leading a church like St. Thomas's Church, one of the biggest churches in the country, one of the most pioneering churches. What an amazing church to lead. There's the prize. Are you prepared to pay the price? It was a high challenge one, because for me, the prize wasn't a prize I wanted. I'm a different personality from Mike. I didn't want to lead that church. I remember I went back and said to my wife, Ellie, I don't want the prize, so why would I pay the price? And I went through this time where actually the Lord had to give me invitation. And what happened was, one time I was reading the biography of Charles Finney, and I read about when he walked into this mill, and the Lord said to him, don't even say anything, just look at the women in the mill and just wait. And he waited, and the women started giggling because he's a funny looking guy. But as he just stood there, the manifest presence of the Holy Spirit just came into the building, and the women went from laughing to crying and started repenting and came to faith, and he hadn't even said anything. And I remember reading that and being in tears just between me and the Lord, no one knew, and saying, God, I'd so like to have a level of walk with you where that happened, And that was a private conversation between me and the Lord. And then the same day in the evening, somebody at church came up to me and said, hey, Paul, I've had this word for you. I actually got it about 3 months ago, but it's a bit weird, so I haven't said it. But I keep feeling convicted. I need to share this with you. Can I share it with you? And I said, sure. I said, have you heard about some 19th century evangelist guy, and he went into this mill, and there's such presence of God came in that the women there just came to faith and fell to their knees and felt conviction. And I was really shocked. This is the same day. And I said, yeah, I have heard of him. And she said to me, the word's just this: God wants to make you like that. And when she said that, in my head, I just had this thought. I'm certain it's from the Lord. It was this: and if you want it, you have to be prepared to lead St. Thomas's Church. And suddenly that was an invitation that I wanted. Suddenly that was worth all of the challenge of leading that church. And it was a different thing. So what was the prize for Mike Green wasn't the prize for me. That was actually the price. The prize was something different. And so people at D4, they need a prize if they're going to be prepared to pay the price. And then they become empowered. And so I think it's really important for us at the point at which we start to delegate that we don't just assume that what motivates people is the same as what motivates us, but we're actually trying to help them to engage with what's God's calling on your life, what's it mean for you to step into this, and how can I support you and release you to do that. And I think one of the things for us as leaders at D4 is we have to deal with our own insecurity, because usually it means in some way we do ourselves out of a role, we do ourselves out of a job, we have to step back. And I see a lot of great leaders who take people through D1, 2, and 3, but who can't make it to D4, because when the next generation take on the vision, they'll do it differently from us. And if we're not prepared to allow them to innovate at this point, this fits with the discipleship triangle, doesn't it? Do you remember information, imitation, innovation? In a way, imitation is D2 and D3. D4 is now it's their chance to innovate. They've got the DNA, they've listened to you, they've spent time. You've got to release them at that point and recognize it might look different from what it looked like during your season of leadership, of whatever it is that you're doing there. So that's a challenging thing for us as we seek to release empowered leaders. So any questions on, just before we do general questions, any comments or questions on D4 there from anybody? And we're nearly at the end now. We're going to probably finish in about, probably do 10 more minutes for Q&A. But if you need to leave, then feel free to, and we'll record this, keep this recording if you want to watch the Q&A later. But any questions on that D4 page or comments?
Maybe an observation, Paul.
Sure.
This is Art.
Hi, Art.
How you doing, brother?
Good to see you.
I just recognize there is a correlation between the L4 and the D2 that you are doing, and I'm calling this out for you being an L4 leader. And that is, In this L4 here, you're sharing how Mike shared both the price and the prize, and he's calling out the value. And that's what you did in D2 while we're there. And you're leading us to a place of helping somebody see the conviction, this is hard, but this is good. It's the same kind of thing. And when I'm in D2, I really don't know what to value yet. And as Alexandria was, I believe it was, asked the question about spiritual warfare, when things get hard, we tend to be tuned in our Christian culture to believe it's not God. And you really help us through that. So that's my observation.
Yeah, very helpful. Thank you, Art. Yeah, very helpful. Anyone else? Observations, comments, questions? Might be about D4, about any of these things, or if there's something that's occurred to you as you're listening that you think will be helpful for other people to hear.
Yeah, Paul, I have a question, Mike. I missed the first part of this. So my question is, I've heard people talk about dying to self as you make the different corners. Is there any more detail, or do you have any comments related to that and maybe the specifics of dying to self as you go from one
Sure.
to the other?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I can't see, I don't know why, but it's not showing me who's speaking there. Is that Mike that was speaking? So
yes,
me,
it
Mike,
was.
the dynamics of dying to self, that it's always a three-stage dynamic. So if you were going to draw it like draw the cross, there's generally, most of us have three stages of the cross, don't we? Everything in our life is either before the cross, if I can just move that across so it fits there, or it's on the cross right now. Yeah, or it's after the cross. And after the cross, of course, we have resurrection power. And generally, before the cross, what we're asking is, will you bless my agenda, Lord? Yeah, please, will you bless my agenda? So, for example, in a church setting, it might be we take on missional discipleship and we'd say, and actually, if we're honest, our agenda is we want to get a bigger church with more income, more butts on seats, more income. Yeah. So, Lord, would you please do that? I'm prepared to do this stuff, but will you bless my agenda? There's usually a crucifixion phase, isn't there? Which is where we have to give up our agenda to God's agenda. So on the 3DM journey, what I see often with people, with pastors, would be where people are saying, gosh, I don't know if we're ever going to grow the church more than we have this way, but I know I'm never going to go back. I mean, I'm called to be a disciple, not just a believer. And honestly, God, the number of people at my church, that's in your hands. I know it's not my job to control that outcome. It's my job to be obedient to what you told me to do, and I'm going to do it. Even if I never see another person come to faith in my life, I'm still going to go after mission, discipleship, community. I'm going to try and build that. Yeah, so that's really where you're laying down your agenda and allowing the Lord to replace it. And then after the cross, that's where God's agenda has become your agenda, and that's the place of freedom and supernatural breakthrough, isn't it? And it may be that sometimes it's like, honestly, if I never get a big church, I don't care. Doesn't matter. I know that I'm doing what God wants. I've got peace about it. I'm excited about it. I'm seeing people grow. I'm seeing people come to faith. Or it might be that, I mean, for me in Sheffield, on the cross actually took me. I was actually in hospital for 3 months, off work for 6 months. I was sick. I mean, it was really bad, the on the cross bit, where I had to stop trying to be Mike Breen and actually be myself and actually start to lead it the way God was calling me to. After the cross, for me, in that situation, we had probably seven years where we were seeing between 250 and 300 people come to faith through missional communities. That was amazing. Don't see that every time. I mean, who knows what it's going to look like? It's different each time, isn't it? But I think before the cross, on the cross, after the cross. So I think when you're thinking about dying to self as you go around these things, I think it's really helpful to be asking the question for ourselves as leaders, but also for our people. Where are people trying to get God to bless their agenda? Where is God trying to get people to lay down their agenda, and how can we help them to do that? And to call it out when people have gone through that process and are actually seeing some breakthroughs. It's really encouraging. There's not one spirit-filled Christian alive who hasn't got supernatural power, resurrection power in their life in at least some area of their life. Otherwise, they wouldn't be a Christian. And it's actually very encouraging to call that out, and part of the encouragement can be, honestly, when I first knew you, yeah, you liked the vision, but you were really pretty flaky. You didn't really push through. And what I've seen is I know this has been a really painful time, but boy, your level of perseverance is completely different from what it was. And I feel like your reliability now is completely different from where it was. And isn't that interesting? Because that feels like it's straight out of the Romans 5 playbook there. It's like suffering, perseverance, character. So now let's see what the hope is that the Lord's going to hold up. Do you see what I mean? So I think it's calling those things out as people begin to get some breakthrough is really helpful too, as we coach people. I don't know, that was perhaps a little bit of a general answer, Mike, but is that helpful?
That's helpful. Thank you.
Anyone else? We've probably got time for maybe one more question or comment. Okay, well, thanks for joining me, guys. I hope that's been helpful to you. And can I just pray for us as we finish? Lord, I want to thank you for my brothers and sisters giving the time up to join me for this. And we're all online together because we want to imitate you, Lord. We want to walk with you, and we want to build mission and discipleship in our lives and with our friends and in our groups and in our churches. And so we just want to commit that to you. We commit those things to you and ask that you direct our paths as we keep trying to do that. And we pray that you'd make us wise leaders who actually multiply ourselves into others, and where we see not just ourselves leading, but we see increasing numbers of people equipped and empowered and sent out by us, so that we can multiply that gospel work. And we pray that you continue to do that in us and through us, Lord, as we commit ourselves to learning how to walk in discipleship. Amen. Thanks, guys. I'm going to put this on the 3DM Vimeo website, which I think is Vimeo/We Are 3DM. And it will take some time before it's ready, but probably by tomorrow it will be on there. So if anyone else needs it, that's where it will be. Thank you.